The telegram had been brief, almost cruel in its efficiency. Marriage arranged. Arrive Cheyenne, Wyoming Territory, October 15, 1883. Yates Ormond awaits. Catherine Zimmerman clutched the worn paper as the stagecoach bounced along the rutted trail, dust coating everything in a fine layer of grit that seemed to mirror the dryness in her throat. She had expected cruelty. The letters from the matchmaker had painted a picture of a hardened rancher, a man who needed a wife to cook and clean, nothing more. At 22, Catherine had exhausted her options back in Philadelphia. Her father's debts had swallowed their modest home, and her mother's death 2 years prior had left her alone with an aunt who made it clear that charity had limits. The mail-order bride advertisement had seemed like destiny, or at least an escape. The other women in the stagecoach whispered among themselves, casting occasional glances her way. Catherine kept her eyes fixed on the window, watching as the landscape transformed from rolling hills to something wilder, more untamed. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still dusted with early snow that caught the afternoon light. First time out west? The question came from an older woman across from her, weathered face kind despite the hardness around her eyes. Yes, madam. Catherine's voice came out smaller than she intended. Meeting someone, my husband. The word felt foreign on her tongue. Well, my future husband, it is arranged. The woman nodded knowingly. Got a name, Yates Ormond. He has a ranch outside Golden. Something flickered across the woman's face, surprise maybe, or recognition. Yates Ormond. Well, I will be. You are a lucky one, dear. Catherine's heart sank. Lucky. That usually meant wealthy, which meant old, which meant exactly the kind of cold arrangement she had been dreading. She had imagined a man twice her age, perhaps scarred by war or drink, viewing her as property purchased through correspondence. The stagecoach rolled into Golden just as the sun began its descent, painting everything in shades of amber and rose. The town sprawled along Clear Creek, buildings of wood and stone pressed against the foothills. It was smaller than she had imagined, but bustling with activity. Cowboys led horses down the main street, women hurried with baskets, and the sound of a piano drifted from one of the saloons. Catherine's hands trembled as she gathered her single trunk. Everything she owned fit into that battered case, a reality that made her feel small and exposed. Miss Zimmerman. The voice was deep, careful, nothing like the bark she had expected. She turned, and her breath caught. Yates Ormond stood perhaps 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered beneath a worn canvas jacket. But it was his face that struck her, young, maybe 28 at most, with dark hair that curled slightly beneath his hat. His eyes were an unexpected gray-blue, and they watched her with something she could not quite name. Nervousness, perhaps. Uncertainty. Mr. Ormond. She managed a small curtsy, awkward with her traveling dress dusty and wrinkled. Please, just Yates. He reached for her trunk, movements gentle despite his size. The wagon is just here. I thought if you are not too tired we might get supper in town before heading to the ranch. Let you get your bearings. Catherine blinked. She had expected to be hauled immediately to his property, installed in her new role without ceremony. That would be kind, thank you. He loaded her trunk with an ease that spoke of hard work, then offered his hand to help her into the wagon. His palm was calloused but warm, and he released her the moment she was settled, as though afraid to presume. The restaurant he chose was modest but clean, with checkered tablecloths and the smell of roasting meat. Yates held her chair, waited until she was comfortable, then sat across from her with his hat in his hands. I expect you are tired from traveling, he said, fingers working the brim of his hat, and probably wondering what you have gotten yourself into. Catherine met his eyes, surprised by his directness. The thought has crossed my mind. A smile tugged at his mouth, transforming his serious face into something warm. I will be honest with you, Miss Zimmerman. I am not good at this. Talking, I mean, people. He paused, collecting his thoughts. I bought the ranch 3 years back, built it up from nothing. It is good land, but it is lonely. My neighbor, Mrs. Fletcher, she is the one who suggested I write to that matchmaker service. Why did you agree? The question slipped out before Catherine could stop it. Yates considered this, his eyes distant. My parents had a good marriage, full of talking and laughing, even when times were hard. My father died when I was 16, and my mother, she just faded after that. I think she died of loneliness more than anything else. I did not want to end up like that. He looked at her directly. But I will not force anything on you. We can take time, get to know each other proper. Catherine felt something loosen in her chest, a tension she had been carrying since Philadelphia. I appreciate that. The meal arrived, simple but hearty, beef and potatoes and fresh bread. They ate in a comfortable silence punctuated by small observations. Yates pointed out landmarks through the window, told her about the town's founding during the gold rush, spoke about his horses with an enthusiasm that made his whole face light up. You really love them, Catherine observed, watching him describe his breeding program. Horses do not lie, he said simply. They are honest about what they need, what they feel. I respect that. The sun had fully set by the time they left town, the wagon following a well-worn path that curved along the creek before climbing into the hills. Stars emerged overhead, more than Catherine had ever seen in Philadelphia, a blanket of light that made her feel both insignificant and part of something vast. It is beautiful, she whispered. Wait until morning, Yates said softly. The view from the house, you can see clear to the mountains. The ranch house appeared as a dark silhouette against the stars. As they drew closer, Catherine could make out details, a 2-story structure of solid timber, with a wide porch and smoke curling from the chimney. I had Mrs. Fletcher come by today, Yates explained as he helped her down. She freshened everything up, made sure there was food in the larder. Your room is upstairs on the right. Has its own stove for cold nights, her own room. Catherine felt tears prick her eyes at his thoughtfulness. Inside, lamplight revealed a home that was clean and well-maintained. The furniture was simple but sturdy, clearly handmade with care. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace and the smell of bread and stew lingered in the air. Mrs. Fletcher left supper, but I imagine you are more tired than hungry. Yates set her trunk at the base of the stairs. I will show you up. The room he led her to was small but charming, with a real bed covered in a colorful quilt, a dresser with a mirror, and that promised stove already radiating warmth. Wildflowers sat in a jar on the windowsill, their colors muted in the lamplight. I picked those this morning, Yates said, sounding almost embarrassed. Thought it might make the room feel less bare. Catherine touched one of the petals gently. Thank you for everything. You have been very kind. He nodded, backing toward the door. My room is downstairs on the far side of the house. If you need anything, just call. We will talk more tomorrow, figure things out proper. He paused at the threshold. I am glad you came, Miss Zimmerman. I hope you will be happy here. Then he was gone, his footsteps retreating down the stairs, leaving Catherine alone with her thoughts and the unexpected reality of Yates Ormond. She prepared for bed slowly, washing away the travel dust with water from the pitcher, changing into her nightgown. The bed was softer than she expected, the quilts heavy and warm. Through the window, she could see the stars and the dark shapes of mountains in the distance. She had expected cruelty, cold indifference, a transaction of needs. Instead, she had found a man who picked wildflowers and spoke of loneliness with raw honesty. Sleep came slowly. her mind spinning with possibilities and the memory of gray-blue eyes that had looked at her like she was something precious. Morning arrived with golden light streaming through the window and the sound of a rooster crowing somewhere nearby. Catherine dressed quickly in one of her simple day dresses, pinned her dark hair into a practical bun, and made her way downstairs. The smell of coffee and frying bacon drew her to the kitchen, where Yates stood at the stove, spatula in hand. He had changed into clean work clothes, his hair still damp from washing. "Good morning." He glanced over his shoulder, offering that small smile. "I hope the rooster did not wake you too early. Old Red has no sense of propriety." "I am used to early mornings," Catherine said, which was not entirely true, but she wanted him to think her capable. "Coffee is hot. Cups are in that cabinet." He gestured with the spatula. "Do you like eggs?" "Yes, thank you." They ate breakfast at the kitchen table, the morning sun illuminating dust motes in the air. Yates explained the daily routine of the ranch, the feeding schedules, the repairs he was working on. Catherine listened, trying to absorb it all, this new life that felt both alien and oddly comfortable. "I thought, if you are agreeable, you might want to see the place today," Yates said, soaking up egg yolk with a piece of bread. "Get familiar with where things are. No pressure to work yet, just looking." "I would like that." Catherine surprised herself with how much she meant it. The ranch was more extensive than she had realized. Yates walked her through the barn, introducing her to each horse with the solemnity of presenting old friends. There was Copper, his riding horse, a bay gelding with intelligent eyes. Starlight, a pregnant mare he was particularly proud of, a handful of others in various stages of training. "I want to build this into something special," he explained, running his hand along Starlight's neck. "Good stock, bred for endurance and temperament, horses people can trust. How long have you been working with them?" "Since I was old enough to climb on one. My father was a cavalry officer before he left the service. He taught me everything." Yates's voice carried both pride and old grief. "Said a man who cannot read a horse's heart has no business riding one." Catherine watched him with the animals, the gentle way he moved, how he spoke in low tones that seemed to calm even the skittish yearling in the far stall. Everything about him contradicted the harsh rancher she had imagined. They walked the property, Yates pointing out the boundaries, the creek that provided water, the pastures where the horses grazed. The mountains rose dramatically to the west, their presence both protective and imposing. "It gets cold in winter," he warned. "Snow can pile up past the porch. But the house is solid and we keep plenty of wood stored." Catherine noticed his use of the word, the assumption of her staying. As if reading her thoughts, Yates stopped, turning to face her. "I want you to know, Miss Zimmerman, you are not trapped here. If after some time you decide this is not what you want, I will make sure you get back east safe. I will provide funds, whatever you need. I want you here because you choose to be, not because you have no other option." The words struck something deep in Catherine's chest. She had spent so long with no choices, pushed by circumstance and obligation. The offer of freedom, genuine freedom, was more valuable than gold. "That means a great deal," she said softly, "but I would like to try, to see if this could work." His face brightened in a way that made him look younger. "I would like that too." The days began to form a pattern. Catherine rose early, learning to make the strong coffee Yates preferred, cooking breakfast while he handled the first round of feeding. She discovered a talent for biscuits, and the way Yates's eyes closed in appreciation when he bit into one gave her an absurd amount of pleasure. She began helping with the lighter chores, gathering eggs from the chickens, tending the small vegetable garden that Mrs. Fletcher had helped maintain, learning to pump water from the well. Her hands, soft from city life, began to callous and roughen, but she found she did not mind. Yates was patient, showing her tasks multiple times without condescension, quick to praise her successes. When she accidentally left the chicken coop unlatched and spent an hour chasing hens around the yard, he simply helped her round them up, laughing in a way that made her laugh too, until they were both breathless and covered in feathers. "At least we know you are fast," he teased, catching the last hen. "I am beginning to understand why you need a wife," Catherine retorted, surprising herself with the playfulness. "Someone has to keep you from being pecked to death." They talked more as the days passed. In the evenings, after the work was done, they would sit on the porch with coffee, watching the sun set behind the mountains. Yates spoke of his childhood in Kansas, his father's death in a riding accident, the years of hard work that had allowed him to purchase this land. Catherine shared her own story, her mother's long illness, her father's poor investments, the slow erosion of her former life. "You miss it?" Yates asked one evening, his chair tilted back against the house wall. "Philadelphia," Catherine considered this. "I miss my mother. I miss feeling like I knew where I belonged, but the city itself, no." She looked out at the darkening landscape. "There is more space here, more room to breathe. I felt that way when I came west, like my lungs could finally fill all the way." She glanced at him, at his profile in the fading light. He had become familiar to her, the way he pushed his hair back when he was thinking, the small scar on his chin from a horse kick in his youth, the careful way he chose his words. And she found herself wanting to know more, to understand everything about this gentle man who had welcomed her without demands. On Sunday, Yates asked if she would like to attend church in town. Catherine agreed, curious to see Golden again, to meet the community. The small church was packed, families crowding the wooden pews. Catherine felt eyes on her, the curiosity of a small town encountering a stranger. Yates guided her to a pew near the middle, his hand light on her back, a gesture that felt both protective and proper. After the service, they were immediately surrounded. Mrs. Fletcher, the older woman who had been helping maintain the house, embraced Catherine like a long-lost daughter. Others introduced themselves, the blacksmith and his wife, the doctor, families with children who stared wide-eyed at the new woman. "You got a good one," Mrs. Fletcher whispered to Catherine. "Yates is the finest man in this county. Helped my husband rebuild our barn after the storm last year, would not take a penny for it." The words settled into Catherine's growing understanding of the man she had agreed to marry. Everyone spoke of him with genuine affection, stories of his helpfulness, his fairness, his quiet integrity. They had lunch at the hotel restaurant, and Catherine found herself relaxing into the community's warmth. The West might be wild, but there was a solidarity here she had not expected. People dependent on each other for survival and company. On the ride back, Yates was quiet, thoughtful. "Something on your mind?" Catherine ventured. "I was thinking we should talk about the marriage," he said carefully. "I do not want to rush you, but legally it would offer you protections. The ranch would be half yours. If something happened to me, you would be secure." Catherine's heart began to beat faster. "Are you proposing?" "I suppose I am, though not very romantically." He pulled the wagon to a stop, turning to face her fully. "Catherine, I know we have not known each other long, but these past couple weeks, they have been the best I can remember. You make the house feel like a home, you make me laugh, and I think maybe we could be happy together, properly happy." "I think so too," Catherine said, her voice steady despite her racing pulse. "Yes, Yates, I will marry you for real." His smile was brilliant, transforming his entire face. "Tomorrow, then. The circuit judge is in town through Tuesday. We could make it official." "Tomorrow," Catherine agreed. They were married the next afternoon in the same small church, with Mrs. Fletcher and her husband as witnesses. Catherine wore her best dress, a blue calico that brought out her eyes, and Yates wore a suit he admitted to owning but never wearing, the collar making him tug uncomfortably. The ceremony was brief, but when Yates slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, Catherine felt the weight of it like a promise. When the judge pronounced them married, and Yates kissed her, soft and careful, something shifted in her chest, a door opening to possibilities she had not dared imagine. They celebrated with dinner at the hotel, Mrs. Fletcher insisting on paying for a cake. The small community gathered to congratulate them, and Catherine found herself laughing, genuinely happy in a way she had not been since before her mother's death. On the ride home now as Yates's wife, Catherine felt both nervous and excited. They had been living together for weeks, but this was different. This was real. Yates seemed to sense her anxiety. "Nothing has to change tonight," he said quietly. "We move at your pace, always." But Catherine found she did not want to wait. This man who had shown her nothing but kindness and respect, who made her laugh and feel safe, she wanted to truly be his wife. That night, in the room that had been hers but was now theirs, Yates was gentle in ways she had not expected. He treated her like something precious, his touches reverent, his words soft assurances. When Catherine cried afterward, he held her close, worried he had hurt her, until she explained these were tears of relief and unexpected joy. "I was so afraid," she whispered against his chest, "of what this would be, of who you would be." "I am just a man," he murmured into her hair, "a man who is grateful every day that you chose to stay. I am grateful I came." Autumn deepened into winter, and Catherine discovered she had a talent for ranch life. She learned to preserve vegetables, to make soap, to mend the endless tears in work clothes. She helped Yates with the horses, learning to read their moods, to assist with grooming and feeding. Her fear of the large animals gradually transformed into respect and affection. Starlight foaled on a cold November night, and Catherine stood with Yates in the barn, watching as the mare delivered a perfect colt with a white star on his forehead. "He is beautiful," Catherine breathed, watching the gangly creature struggle to his feet. "He is ours," Yates said, his arm around her waist. "Yours if you want him. You can name him, train him." "Really, really. You are part of this now, Catherine. Everything here, it is yours as much as mine." She named the colt Promise for the future he represented. Working with him became her project, learning the patience required to gentle a young horse, the satisfaction of small progressions. Yates coached her, but mostly he stepped back, letting her develop her own relationship with the animal. Winter brought the promised snow, drifts that piled against the house and made the daily chores a battle against cold. But inside, the house was warm, the stove always going, the smell of baking bread and simmering stew a constant comfort. Catherine and Yates grew closer in the forced proximity. They played cards in the evenings, read aloud from the small collection of books Yates owned, talked about their dreams for the ranch. Catherine began sketching, a talent she had not indulged since childhood, filling pages with drawings of the horses, the mountains, Yates's hands as he worked. "You are good at this," Yates said, studying a sketch of copper. "Really good. My mother taught me. She was an artist before she married." "Why did she stop?" "My father thought it was frivolous, not practical." Catherine's voice carried old hurt. Yates was quiet for a moment. "I think it is wonderful. You should keep doing it. Maybe we could frame some, hang them in the house." Such small kindnesses, but they accumulated like the snow outside, building into something substantial and real. Christmas came, and Catherine made her first attempt at a proper celebration. She baked pies, roasted a goose Mrs. Fletcher had brought over, decorated the house with pine boughs and ribbons. Yates surprised her with a new set of drawing pencils he had ordered from Denver, and Catherine gave him a scarf she had knitted, the stitches uneven but made with love. They attended a Christmas dance in town, and Yates proved surprisingly graceful, guiding Catherine through reels and waltzes with confidence. She laughed as they spun, her dress flaring out, the warmth of his hand on her waist grounding her. "I did not know you could dance," she said, breathless. "My mother insisted, said even a ranch boy needed to know how to treat a lady proper. She would be proud of you." His eyes softened. "I hope so. I think she would have loved you." Winter gradually released its grip, and spring arrived with rushing creeks and fields of wildflowers. Catherine discovered she was pregnant in late March, her monthly courses ceasing, a new fullness to her breasts, waves of nausea that Mrs. Fletcher identified immediately when Catherine mentioned it, telling Yates was terrifying. They had been married less than 6 months. But when she finally gathered the courage over breakfast, his reaction was pure joy. A baby. He stood so quickly his chair fell backward. "We are having a baby. Are you happy?" Catherine asked, needing to hear it. "Happy." "Catherine, I am." He pulled her up into his arms, spinning her carefully. "I am the happiest man alive." The pregnancy was easier than Catherine had feared. Dr. Morrison in town checked on her regularly, pronouncing her healthy and the baby strong. Yates became impossibly protective, insisting she rest more, taking on chores she usually handled. "I am pregnant, not fragile," Catherine protested, watching him scrub clothes she had planned to wash. "I know, but let me fuss. It makes me feel useful." She learned to accept his care, even as she continued working with Promise, now a yearling who followed her like a devoted dog. The colt's trust in her felt like a metaphor for her own transformation, from frightened city girl to confident ranch wife. Summer brought scorching days and the hard work of haying. Catherine helped where she could, her growing belly making some tasks impossible. But she cooked enormous meals, kept the house running, managed the garden that flourished under her attention. In the evenings, Yates would rest his hand on her belly, his face full of wonder when the baby kicked. "Strong already," he murmured. "Takes after you. Or you. You are the one who can lift a hay bale like it weighs nothing. That is not strength, that is just being stubborn." They argued playfully about names, Catherine favoring traditional choices while Yates suggested increasingly creative options. "We are not naming our son Wildfire," Catherine said firmly, "but imagine calling him for dinner. Wild, come eat, very practical." She threw a pillow at him, laughing despite herself. The baby arrived in early September, a long labor that terrified Yates more than Catherine. Dr. Morrison and Mrs. Fletcher attended her, while Yates wore a path in the kitchen floor below, pacing and praying. When the cry finally came, high and indignant, Yates took the stairs 3 at a time. "A boy," Mrs. Fletcher announced, beaming. "A big, healthy boy." Catherine held their son, exhausted and exhilarated, watching Yates's face as he approached. "You did it," he whispered, kneeling beside the bed. "He is perfect. You are perfect. Would you like to hold your son?" Yates took the baby with shaking hands, cradling him like spun glass. The infant's eyes opened, unfocused but searching, and Yates made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. "Hello, little one, I am your father." "William," Catherine said softly. "William James Ormond, after your father." Yates looked at her, tears streaming down his face. "You remembered." "Of course I remembered. Parenthood transformed them both." Yates proved a natural father, patient with William's crying, helpful with the endless needs of an infant. Catherine watched him walking the floor at night, singing old cavalry songs to soothe their son, and fell more deeply in love. The ranch continued to grow. Word spread about Yates's horse breeding program, and buyers came from as far as Colorado. Catherine managed the books, discovering she had a head for numbers, tracking bloodlines and sales with meticulous care. Promise, now fully grown, became her riding horse, gentle and responsive. She would ride the property with William strapped to her in a sling Mrs. Fletcher had shown her how to make, the baby sleeping against her chest while she checked fences and water sources. 2 years later, a second child arrived, a daughter they named Rose, with Catherine's dark hair and Yates's gray-blue eyes. William was fascinated by his sister, constantly wanting to hold her, to show her his toys and rocks and anything he found interesting. The house expanded, Yates adding rooms as the family grew. Catherine's drawings now covered the walls, framed carefully, a gallery of their life. The ranch prospered, their horses gaining a reputation for quality that brought steady income. On their 5th anniversary, Yates took Catherine to the ridge above the house, the place where the view stretched clear to the mountains. They left the children with Mrs. Fletcher, stealing a rare afternoon alone. "You remember that first night?" Yates asked, his arm around her as they sat on the grass. "How terrified you looked climbing down from that stage coach." "I was terrified. I expected a monster and found you instead." "I was pretty scared too. Worried I would say something stupid, that you would take one look and run back to Philadelphia." Catherine leaned against him, comfortable in the warmth of his presence. "I am glad I stayed, glad you were nothing like I feared." "What did you fear?" "Cruelty. Indifference. Being just a pair of hands to work, nothing more." "And what did you find?" She turned to kiss him, soft and lingering. "Home, love, everything I did not dare hope for." The years continued their steady march. William grew tall and serious with his father's way with horses. Rose proved wild and adventurous, constantly exploring, dragging her brother on expeditions that left them both muddy and happy. A third child arrived, another boy they named Thomas, who seemed determined to be louder than both siblings combined. The ranch became one of the most successful in the territory. Yates hired help, 2 young cowboys who lived in the bunkhouse he built, but he remained hands-on, working alongside his employees, earning their respect through action rather than words. Catherine became a pillar of the community. She organized church socials, taught drawing to interested children, helped new brides adjust to Western life. She remembered her own fear and confusion and worked to ease that transition for others. Mrs. Fletcher, now in her 70s, became like a mother to Catherine, the older woman teaching her everything from medicinal herbs to the social intricacies of small-town life. When Mrs. Fletcher's husband passed, she moved into the small cottage on the ranch property, becoming a beloved grandmother figure to the children. On a warm June evening, with all 3 children finally asleep, Catherine and Yates sat on the porch, watching fireflies dance above the grass. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" Catherine asked, her head on his shoulder. "Different how? If you had been the cruel man I expected, if I had not stayed." Yates was quiet, his fingers tracing patterns on her arm. "I think about it sometimes. About how close I came to just staying alone. I had almost talked myself out of that matchmaker letter a dozen times. I am glad you sent it, so am I, every single day, even when Rose tracked mud through the house, even then. When William let the chickens out again, still glad. When Thomas screamed through Sunday service, my favorite moment, he kissed the top of her head. Catherine, you and the children, you are everything. The ranch, the horses, all of it means nothing without you." She tilted her face up to his. "I love you. I do not think I say it enough. You show it, every day in 1,000 small ways, but I never tire of hearing it." "I love you," she repeated. My gentle cowboy who was never cruel, not for a single moment. The summer William turned 10, a drought gripped the region. Water became scarce, pastures brown and brittle. Yates worked long hours hauling water, rationing supplies, making impossible decisions about which stock to keep. The stress lined his face, grayed his temples earlier than they should have. Catherine stood beside him through it all, managing the household on shrinking resources, keeping the children occupied and unworried, being the steady presence he needed. She sold several of her drawings to a buyer from Denver, the money going toward feed and supplies. One particularly bad evening, Yates came in defeated, slumping at the kitchen table. "I might lose them," he said, voice hoarse. "The horses. If the drought does not break soon, I do not have enough water." Catherine knelt beside him, taking his rough hands in hers. "Then we will rebuild. We have done it before, we will do it again, but I do not think it will come to that. We will find a way." "How are you so strong?" "Because I learned from you. You showed me what real strength looks like, gentleness, even when it is hard, kindness, even when you are exhausted. Faith that things will work out." He pulled her into his lap, holding her close. "I do not deserve you. You deserve everything good, and you have me always." The drought broke in August with storms that threatened floods after the dry spell. But the rain was salvation, filling creeks, greening pastures, saving the ranch. Yates stood in the downpour, face turned to the sky, and laughed with relief so pure it brought tears to Catherine's eyes. They survived. More than survived, they thrived. Rose, at 8, announced she wanted to train horses like her father. Thomas, now 5, was more interested in drawing like his mother, filling pages with crooked horses and lopsided houses. William, serious and capable at 10, showed an interest in the business side, asking questions about breeding lines and sales that impressed even Dr. Morrison, who had studied such things. The ranch expanded again. Yates purchased additional land, building their holdings into something substantial. But he never lost his gentleness, that core of kindness that had made Catherine fall in love with him. One winter evening, with snow falling softly outside and the children playing checkers by the fire, Catherine watched her husband reading to Thomas, his deep voice bringing the adventure story to life. Rose was curled against his other side, fighting sleep, while William sprawled on the floor, supposedly doing arithmetic but mostly just watching his family. This was everything she had never known she needed. These people, this place, this life built on mutual respect and genuine love. She thought of the frightened girl on that stagecoach, expecting cruelty, braced for disappointment. If she could speak to her younger self, she would tell her to hope, to trust, to believe that goodness existed even in unexpected places. "Mother, are you crying?" William asked, his sharp eyes catching everything. "Happy tears," Catherine assured him. "Just happy tears." Yates looked up, concern crossing his face, but she smiled and shook her head. He understood, as he always did, that quiet communication they had developed over the years. The children grew, as children do, each year bringing new challenges and joys. William, at 16, was his father's right hand on the ranch, capable and hard-working. Rose, 14, could break a horse as well as any cowboy, her fearlessness balanced by genuine empathy for the animals. Thomas, now 11, had become quite the artist, his drawings selling in Denver galleries, a source of pride and wonder for the entire family. Catherine's hair showed silver threads, and Yates's face bore the lines of a life well lived. But their love had only deepened, roots growing stronger with time. "We should add on again," Yates said one evening, studying the house. "Maybe a proper studio for Thomas, and William will want his own place soon, probably with a wife of his own." "A wife? He is only 16. I was thinking ahead, and you know Emma Fletcher has her eye on him. Catherine did know. Mrs. Fletcher's granddaughter, recently moved to Golden, had indeed been making her interest clear. The thought of William courting, possibly marrying, made her feel old and proud simultaneously. When did we become the older generation, she mused, when we were not paying attention? Yates pulled her against him, their bodies fitting together with long familiarity. But I like it. Grandmother Catherine has a nice ring. You are getting ahead of yourself. Maybe. But I am good at planning ahead. Look how well the matchmaker advertisement worked out. She laughed, the sound still bright after all these years. That was luck, pure luck. No, he said seriously. That was destiny. You were meant to be here with me. I have never doubted that, not for 1 second. True to Yates's prediction, William began courting Emma the following spring. Catherine watched her eldest son navigate love with the same quiet determination his father showed, small gestures and thoughtful words rather than grand pronouncements. Emma was a sweet girl, practical and kind, who fit into their family easily. When William asked his parents' permission to propose, Yates clasped his son's shoulder with pride. You have chosen well, but you do not need my permission. You are your own man. I want your blessing, though. You have it. You have always had it. The wedding took place the following June, a beautiful ceremony in the now expanded church. Catherine watched her son marry, remembering her own wedding in that same building, how nervous and hopeful she had been. Emma wore a dress Catherine had helped make, and William wore his father's good suit, altered to fit his taller frame. At the reception, Yates pulled Catherine onto the dance floor, holding her like they were young again. Another generation, he murmured. Our son married. It happened so fast. Everything does. That is why I treasure every moment with you. Rose showed no interest in marriage, focused entirely on the horses. She had a gift beyond even Yates's considerable skill, an almost supernatural ability to understand the animals. Buyers began requesting her specifically, trusting her judgment on temperament and training. I do not want to marry, she announced at 15, as if expecting an argument. I want to run the ranch someday, expand the breeding program, maybe start taking in difficult horses to rehabilitate. Then that is what you should do, Yates said simply. You are not disappointed. Why would I be disappointed? You have a vision and the skill to achieve it. That is all any parent could want. Catherine watched her husband with their strong-willed daughter and loved him even more. He had never tried to force their children into predetermined roles, instead nurturing whatever talents and interests they showed. Thomas, at 15, announced his intention to study art in Denver, perhaps even further east. The news struck Catherine's heart, the thought of her youngest so far away, but she supported his dreams even as she dreaded his departure. He has your talent, Yates said, looking at Thomas's latest painting, a stunning landscape of the ranch. He should develop it properly. I will miss him. So will I. But we raised them to be independent, to chase their own futures. We cannot hold them back now. Emma gave birth to Catherine and Yates's first grandchild 2 years after the wedding, a little girl named Clara. Holding the tiny infant, Catherine felt the weight of years and the gift of continuation. Her children were building their own lives, and she and Yates were entering a new phase, still together, still strong. The ranch had become legendary throughout Wyoming and beyond. Ormond horses were prized for their temperament and endurance. Rose had indeed expanded into rehabilitation, taking in abused or traumatized horses and transforming them with patience and skill. William and Emma built their own house on the property, close enough to help but far enough for independence. Thomas had gone to study in Denver, returning for holidays with stories of city life and galleries and opportunities. Catherine recognized from her own past. Through it all, Catherine and Yates remained the center. Their love the foundation everything else was built upon. On their 25th anniversary, the entire family gathered for a celebration. William and Emma with 3 children now, Thomas home from Denver with sketches and stories, Rose with her latest rescue horse to show off, Mrs. Fletcher still spry at 85, and friends from town who had become like family. The party stretched into evening, food and music and laughter filling the expanded house. At some point, Yates took Catherine's hand and led her outside, away from the noise, to their spot on the porch. 25 years, he said, looking out at the land that had become their legacy. Seems impossible. Seems like yesterday, Catherine countered. I can still see that frightened girl stepping off the stagecoach, expecting the worst. What would you tell her if you could? Catherine considered this, her hand in his. I would tell her that sometimes hope is rewarded. That gentleness is not weakness but the truest strength. That love, real love, is built in quiet moments and hard times and choosing each other, every single day. I would tell that terrified man waiting for her that she would exceed every dream he had. That she would make him braver, kinder, better than he ever imagined being. They sat in comfortable silence, watching stars emerge above the mountains, the same mountains that had witnessed their entire journey. You have any regrets? Catherine asked. Yates thought for a long moment. I regret we cannot do it all again. Live these years twice because once does not feel like enough. We still have time. Then let us not waste it. The years continued their inevitable progression. Clara grew, joined by a brother and another sister. Thomas married a girl he met in Denver, an artist like himself, and they split their time between the city and the ranch. Rose remained unmarried but deeply content, her life filled with horses and purpose. Mrs. Fletcher passed peacefully in her sleep at 88, surrounded by the family she had adopted as her own. Her death left a hole, but also gratitude for the years of love and guidance she had provided. Catherine and Yates grew older together, their bodies slowing but their connection only deepening. Gray turned to white, strength to fragility, but they faced each change as they had faced everything else, together and unafraid. On a summer morning, with golden light streaming across the land they had built their life upon, Yates and Catherine sat on the porch, hands intertwined. They were in their 70s now, their children grown with children and even grandchildren of their own. The ranch thrived under Rose's management, their legacy secure. You remember what you said that first night? Yates asked, his voice rougher with age but still gentle. When I told you about my parents, you said you did not want to be lonely, Catherine recalled. That you wanted what they had. We got it, more than got it. We built something beautiful. Catherine leaned her head on his shoulder, the gesture as natural as breathing. You were never cruel, not once. You left me breathless with your gentleness, and you still do. You made it easy. Loving you has been the simplest, best thing I have ever done. Around them, their grandchildren played in the yard. Clara, nearly grown now, worked with a young horse in the paddock, Rose's patient teaching evident in every move. Thomas's children chased each other, their laughter bright and clear. William's youngest helped his father with barn repairs, 3 generations working together. This was the future that had seemed impossible when Catherine stepped off that stagecoach, expecting cruelty and finding grace instead. This family, this land, this overwhelming abundance of love and legacy. I am tired, Yates said softly, and Catherine knew he meant more than just the moment. I know, me too, but grateful, so grateful for every moment. As am I. They sat together as the sun climbed higher, warming their old bones, watching their family thrive. 2 people who had taken a chance on each other. who had chosen kindness over convenience, who had built something enduring from hope and trust, and the gentle strength of genuine love. The wind carried the scent of wildflowers from the meadow, the same wildflowers Yates had picked for Catherine's room that first night. The mountains stood eternal, witness to their story, guardian of the life they had created together in this wild, beautiful place. Catherine squeezed Yates's hand, feeling his familiar warmth, the calluses earned through decades of honest work, the steadiness that had anchored her life. He squeezed back, and they sat in perfect understanding, two hearts that had found each other against all odds and had never let go. Their story was not one of drama or grand gestures, but of daily choices to be kind, to be patient, to love even when it was difficult. It was a story of a woman who expected cruelty and found tenderness, of a man who feared loneliness and found partnership, of two lives weaving together into something neither could have created alone. As the sun reached its zenith, bathing everything in golden light, Catherine and Yates remained on their porch, surrounded by the evidence of their love. Children and grandchildren, horses and land, a community that respected them, and most importantly, each other, still together, still choosing each other, still grateful for the day that frightened girl had stepped off a stagecoach and into the arms of a gentle cowboy who had changed her entire world.